hour and a half at this point now. So, sound good? Awesome, guys, awesome. Dr. John Oakes became a Christian in 1978 as a graduate student at the University of Colorado. He went on to earn his PhD in chemical physics in 1984. John worked as a professor of chemistry and physics for over 34 years as an educator. And so currently he and his wife lead a church in Merced, California. John serves as a president of the Apologetic Research Society and has taught on Christian topics for in more than 80 countries and for 180 churches. So without further ado, to give the topic of who is the real Jesus, please welcome John Oakes, guys.
Sorry about that. Getting my recorder fixed. How are all y'all doing? You're from the Central Valley. 85 degrees today and cloudy. We're loving it. We're loving it. All right. Well, I love any chance I have to speak to a campus group. Now, supposedly this is a campus group, but not campus, not campus, not campus, not campus. But amen. Everybody's welcome. So I was asked to do a Christian Evidences talk, and Jose asked me what topic would you like to speak on, and I do have a PhD in chemical physics, but I did a thing on God and science maybe 3 years ago at Fresno State. And so I said to Jose, I just like to talk about Jesus. So is it okay I just talk about Jesus? So that's what we're going to do. See, the people are coming in now. I'm glad, Shane, you decided to show up at 7:18. That's good timing. You know, you want to be fashionably late. You don't want to, That's the problem, Shane. You're the one I know, so I get to pick on you. Now, he's walking in, but Gary got here 25 minutes early, so he's good. All right. So the topic tonight is, who is the real Jesus? All right. Is he a sage? You know what a sage is, right? You don't know what, that's like the guy on the top of the mountain. You come and ask him, what is the meaning of life? A sage is a wise person. Would you say that Jesus was a sage? Yeah, okay. Or maybe he was a prophet. Or some people would say he was a liar. And that's a common idea that you definitely see that out on the internet. Either that, or they'll say, maybe not that Jesus was a liar, but the people who wrote about him were lying. Some people would say he was crazy. It's a little crazy to step in front of the Pharisees and call them whitewashed tombs and a brood of vipers. That's kind of crazy. Other people would say he was the Messiah, the one who was to come. Son of Man, what's that even mean? It's another label. Some people would say God in the flesh. Others would say just a legend, a myth. And I'm telling you, this is all over the internet. All over the internet. That there was probably a person named Jesus, but almost everything you know about him is a mythologized story made up by people in order to start a Christian movement. Now, could Jesus be a prophet and a sage, both? Yeah, he could, okay. Could he be a liar and a Messiah? No. So certain of these are compatible, others are not. Another idea about Jesus, he was a mere human being, a mere man. That's a common idea. Some people say that he's just one of many religious leaders. In fact, the most common idea about Jesus, perhaps, is this last one. Like Muhammad or Baha'u'llah or Krishna, never mind that Krishna's not even a real person, or some other, Joseph Smith, just one amongst many religious leaders, because all religions more or less go to the same place, kind of like this picture here. Here we go. Yeah. You got your Buddhist way up the mountain. You got your Baha'i way up the mountain, or the Hindu way, or whatever. Kind of all the same thing. Now, what I'm going to show is that if the Bible is right about who Jesus is, then this third idea, this last idea, just doesn't make any sense. So let's do this. Let's talk about some of the other great religious leaders in human history, and let's ask ourselves what they claimed about themselves. Because what we're going to do is we're going to look at what Jesus claimed about himself, and we're going to examine this proposition that he's kind of like Muhammad, or kind of like one of these other religious leaders. Okay, so here we go. Let's start with Confucius. What did Confucius claim about himself? Anybody out there? Did he claim to be the Son of God? Yeah, what did he claim? Yeah, he claimed to be a wise person, to have a useful and helpful philosophy. Now, would you agree that probably Confucius was a relatively wise person who had a pretty decent philosophy? Okay, all right. Did he claim to be a prophet? Did he claim to work miracles? No. All right. Let me see. What about, all right, Joseph Smith. Oh, that's an interesting one. If you look at what Joseph Smith claimed for himself, it's almost identical to what Muhammad claimed for himself. Did Joseph Smith claim to be a prophet? Yes. Did he claim to work miracles? No, he did not. Basically, he claimed that God spoke to him and that he was the mouthpiece of God. That's what he claimed. Let's go to some other religious leaders. Okay, let's talk about Buddha. Did Buddha claim to be a prophet? No. Did he claim to work miracles? No. What did he claim about himself? Remember the first word on that list? To be a sage, a guru, a person with a wise philosophy. And if you know much about Buddhism, honestly, almost everything I know about Buddha, I actually kind of like him. Other than he abandoned his wife and kids, if you ignore that, his eightfold path and his three noble truths, pretty good stuff actually. All right, I'll go with that. Did he claim to work miracles? No, okay. Let me see. What about Muhammad? I don't know if you can read that. It says, thank you for your drawing, Billy, but now we have to kill you. Because he drew Muhammad. That's a joke. I've done this lesson in Muslim countries. I take that slide out right away. All right. So what about Jesus? What did Jesus claim for himself? Let's talk about that. So our line tonight is we're going to look at the claims of Jesus about himself. We're just going to ask some common sense questions. Like, for example, is it true or is it not true? And if that were true, what would be the implications? All right? And then we're going to look at some of the evidence that kind of underlies that claim. We're going to look at messianic prophecies. And if we have time, we might run out of time. We may even spend some time looking at the resurrection. So what about the claims of Jesus? Now, if we look at what Jesus claimed for himself, but by the way, I'll just tell you the answer right now. Jesus made claims about himself that no other person has ever claimed, even close, except crazy people in the crazy place. Have you ever met anybody who claimed to be God? I have. If you spend some time in the crazy place, you meet those people. All right, so what Jesus claimed about him, given what Jesus claimed about himself, he's either crazy, like off his rocker, or the most ridiculous liar ever. Either that or his claims are true. So we'll talk about that. Let's look at our first one. John 5:39. I can't read from here. Hopefully that's the correct one. Let's read John 5:39. John 5, verse 39. Now I'm gonna ask for a volunteer. And since I already shamed Shane a little bit, I'm going to have Shane be my first volunteer. So just get ready. So you're going to be a volunteer on this one. John 5:39. Let's see what Jesus said about himself. Here you go. It says, he's saying to the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, the doctorate of theology of Israel, here's what he said. He said, you diligently study the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me, and yet you refuse to come to me and have life. So Jesus says to the Pharisees, you guys have been reading the Old Testament, right? Well, they didn't call it the Old Testament, just the Bible. You've been studying it your whole life. You are the world's expert in the Bible. He says, you missed the whole point. The entire Bible was written about me. All right, where's Shane? Shane, stand up. Okay, I'd like you to boldly make this claim, and let's see how our crowd, but turn towards them, not towards me. All right, good. Go ahead. Okay, you're laughing, all right? Now, Shane, do it with a little bit more conviction and like you're serious. All right, so the first time you guys chuckled, right? The second time you're like, whoa, that's kind of scary. Thank you very much. You did a great job. Great job. So Jesus stands before them and he simply says, I am the one. I am the one. The entire religion that you guys are living for, it's about me. Now, the way I see it, there's really two possibilities. I don't know. I know it's a postmodern world, so it's true for you, but not true for me and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say either what Jesus said here is true, or it's not true. I don't see any sort of halfway. Because if it's not fully true, then it's crazy and it's ridiculous and as wrong as could possibly be. All right, let's look at another claim of Jesus. Jesus had this interesting tendency to work miracles and then make claims that were sort of related to those miracles. Because what did Jesus do in the first part of John chapter 6? Do we have any Bible experts here? Or even Bible novices for that matter. John chapter 6, verse 1 through 20. What did Jesus do? Yeah, he fed over 10,000 people. Made bread and fish to feed 10,000 people, and there were 12 loaves left, 12 baskets of loaves left over. And then Jesus comes in, and he's here. I'm going to read in John 6, verse 35. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Let's skip down to verse 51. I like what he says in verse 51. Jesus says, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. Then what I want to do is, as we read some of these claims, I want to look at the reactions of the crowds here. All right? And then some of the Jews began to argue sharply among themselves, how can this man give us his flesh? And you saw earlier, they said, isn't this the Nazarene guy? Don't we know his father and his mother? So imagine, I guess I'll be my own. I am the bread of life. Muhammad claims to be the bread of life. He's going to whack down, all right? Let's be real about it. But he claims to be the bread of life. He says, if you feed on me, let's look at another one, John 8. And Jose is going to be my example on this one, all right? Jose, get ready. All right, here we go. John 8, verse 46. All right, here we go. Here we go. John 8, I'll start in verse 45. Yet because I tell you the truth, you don't believe me. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling you the truth, why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God believes me. Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you don't hear is that you do not belong to God. So what's Jesus claiming here? He says, I've lived a perfectly sinless life. All right, Jose, let's go for it. All right. Where's Jalissa? You guys are messing up. Let's do that again. All right.
Come on, can anyone person here, come on, can anyone say that?
No, nobody? All right. Jalissa is saying, how much time do you have? All right. What about this morning? Jesus stood in front of people who'd known him, some of them known for years, and he said, can anybody prove me guilty of sin? And I imagine some of the apostles going, well, there's that one time. Oh, no, actually, no? Okay. No, I can't think of any sin that you ever committed. And look at their response. But the Jews answered him, aren't we right in saying that you are Samaritan and demon-possessed? Now, if any of us said, can anybody prove me guilty of sin, what would be the response? Yeah, like how much time do you have? Do you have a pen and paper? Notice what the response was. Basically, the response was, no, we cannot. Right? Isn't that what they said? No, we cannot. They said, oh, he's crazy. What kind of answer is that? You know? What kind of answer is that to the question, can anybody prove me guilty of sin? Has any religious leader ever claimed to be without sin? Joseph Smith, well, let's not go there, all right? Muhammad, very bad temper, famous for his bad temper. And a few other things, having sex with young underage teenagers and a few other things that might possibly be mentionable there. Going out and fighting wars. Jesus claimed to be without sin, and the only response was he's crazy. Let's go to John 8. All right, we're already there, aren't we? That's right. I'll start in verse 56. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. They said, you are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham? Very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. At this, they picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. What's Jesus claiming for himself here? He says, I'm God. I'm the self-existent one. He didn't say before Abraham was born, I was. That'd be kind of crazy. He said before Abraham was born, I am. So that kind of explains picking up stones, doesn't it? I mean, has anybody else that anybody took seriously ever claimed to be God? No. So who is Jesus? Well, he's either God or a terrible, dangerous person who deserves to be killed. It's kind of interesting, the average American reaction to Jesus. Yeah, I believe in Jesus. I went to church 3 months ago. It was, you know. I believe in Jesus. Yeah, I even read the Bible once. You know, in Jesus' day, there were two groups. The ones who said, Lord, and the ones who wanted to kill him. And the in-between group, it's hard to find those people. All right, let's go to John 11. Let me tell the underlying story. A lot of you know the story. So Lazarus, Mary, and Martha seem to have been probably closer friends with Jesus even than some of the apostles. Maybe they were family relation. I'm not sure exactly, but they were very, very close friends. And of course, by this time, Jesus has healed thousands of people. And he's even raised Jairus' daughter and others from the dead. And so when Lazarus turns sick, like deathly ill, surely Jesus will come and help us out. So they send messengers. Jesus, Lazarus is dying. Come right away. And Jesus is like, I don't know. I'm kind of busy. I don't really have time right now. I'll come. When I get around to it, I'll come. All right. But if you read the account, Jesus knew exactly what was going on. So Lazarus dies. It's 4 days later, right? 4 days later. All right. Very warm climate. All right. What's the condition of a body 4 days after death? It's starting to ooze, and sort of certain liquids are starting to leak out, and there's this incredible, horrible smell. I'm a chemist. Two of the chemicals that are produced when the body decomposes, one of them is called cadaverine, and the other one is called putrescine. All right? Not a good thing. So Jesus comes in, and he's going to make another claim. What does he claim so far? He's claimed to be the one, the anticipated one, the one about whom the whole Bible is written. He's claimed to be the bread of life, the source of eternal life. He's claimed to be without sin. In fact, he's claimed to be God himself. So let's see if he can kind of top this one off. I don't know if it's topping it off or not, but this is quite a claim. So verse 21. So Jesus comes into town. All right, Jesus comes into town, and Martha pulls him aside. Jesus, why didn't you come? Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Jesus said to her, no, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. No, that's not what I mean. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? That's a good question. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. And Jesus says, if you believe in me, if you live and believe in me, you will have eternal life. That's kind of awesome. No need to fear death. Now again, either Jesus is the resurrection and the life, or he's not. I can't see, there's no middle ground here. No middle ground. Now remember, Jesus said, I'm the bread of life, but what did he do just a few hours before that? He made some bread, right? Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. And I have a question for you tonight, very simple. Do you believe this? Do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? And if you believe that, what is a reasonable response to that statement? What is a reasonable response to believing that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? To go to church on a regular basis? To take the name Christian? That is not a reasonable response. That is not even close to a reasonable response. Let's go down. Now, I know that probably 3/4 of you already know what's about to happen. The rest of you can kind of sort of figure it out from what we've already seen. But let's read the story anyway, because it's an amazing story. I love this story. So Jesus goes out to the tomb, and there's a large crowd there because Jewish funerals lasted for several days. They had expensive funerals. Jesus, once more deeply moved, verse 38, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. And his friend said, Jesus, are you aware of the chemical reactions that go on in dead bodies? And, But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor. He's been there for 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? They took away the stone. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And if, in case there's any doubt about what happened, also the horrible smell also came out of that cave. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. You know, I love how the Bible says something so profoundly in the most simple words. Look at the next sentence. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Yeah, I guess so. I kind of see why that might possibly cause you to maybe consider actually believing in him. Yeah, because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. But one thing to notice is there's another group there, same experience, same miracle, same evidence, exact same situation. They went home and did something different. Down there in verse 47, the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here's this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Said, we're going to kill him. Now, why did they want to kill him? Is it because they didn't believe that he did the miracles? No. They wanted to kill him because they did believe he worked the miracle. Because Jesus is a dangerous man. And like I said, you just look around and, I spent a lot of time on campus. I was figuring out the other day, I think I've invited something like 3,000 people, to church in the last whatever amount of time here. Talked to a lot of people. And, I'm good. You want to come to Bible? I'm good. You know what I want to say? Actually, no, you're not good. In fact, nobody's good except God alone, but I don't say that. But, yeah, I'm good. It's cool. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. Yeah, it's a good guy, sage, wise person, nice person, probably really, lifted the lambs and blessed the little babies. That's not the Jesus of the Bible. The Jesus of the Bible is a sinless man who is God in the flesh, and who, if you believe in him, will give you eternal life. Either that or he's a really bad person. Put it this way, if you don't believe in Jesus, you should do everything you can to destroy Christianity, because it's the biggest lie in stealing lives. But having a sort of, it's cool, yeah, that, oh, yeah, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, they're all kind of the same thing. That's nonsense. That makes no sense. That's the meaning of nonsense, isn't it? Okay, forgot that. Okay, good. All right. So was Jesus insane? Actually, we won't turn there, but in Matthew 3:20 through 30, his family come and they say, hey, bring Jesus out of here. He's kind of crazy. But you know what? I don't think Jesus was crazy, because crazy people do crazy things. Jesus was absolutely insane. Or maybe he's a liar. So what do liars do? They lie, And Jesus is no liar. Really, given the fact that liars don't raise people from the dead. That just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Liars don't walk on water. Crazy people don't heal thousands of people. To me, the only reasonable conclusion is that Jesus is God. He is the one about whom all human history points toward. He is the bread of life. Either that, or you ought to really spend as much energy as you have to oppose what he's trying to do. So now what I want to do is I want to look at some of the evidence. Now, for those who were there in that time, they actually saw these miracles. We haven't seen them with our eyes. So you could argue that those miracles don't have quite the impact with us that they had with them. You could argue that. You'd also have to argue a bunch of people lying and this big, massive, conspiracy theory and by a bunch of people got them all killed. I don't know about that. But I want to look at some of the other evidence for Jesus, which is from the Messianic prophecies. Now, we already saw Jesus say, you guys diligently study the scriptures, but you didn't realize it's all about me. Let's read another one. It's in Luke 24, verse 44. Luke 24, verse 44. He said to them, this is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. By the way, the Jews had 3 divisions in their Bible, which was the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. So basically, Jesus saying, I got a long checklist, but there's a couple more checks that have to get checked off. Then I can be, go off into heaven. All right? Now, so what I want to do is I want to look at just a small number of messianic prophecies. But what I want to do is I want to take the skeptic's perspective. Like, okay, now wait a minute. What about this? So the skeptic would ask 3 questions. Number 1, how do I know these prophecies were actually written before Jesus lived? So maybe they kind of made up these prophecies afterward. Now, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because whose prophecies are these? They're the Jews' prophecies. It's still in their Bible. And why would the Jews add this stuff in there? Honestly, this is sort of a nonsense question. But the fact is that we have the Dead Sea Scrolls. All right, we have the entire book of Isaiah. Actually, 2 entire Isaiahs, plus another near entire Isaiah, all from the 2nd, one of them actually from the 3rd century BC. All right, and we have the Septuagint translation to Greek that was done in 250 BC. We also have the Samaritan Pentateuch translation done 500 BC. All right, so one thing I know for sure, even the die-hard skeptic who doesn't have, everything is based on, I do not want to believe in this guy, even they would have to admit, these were written several hundred years before the event. All right, second question, granting to the skeptic the question they might ask. All right, there's one of the pages of the Isaiah scroll. All right, how do I know these things really happened? Now, we're going to look at like 8 or 9 prophecies. And of these 8 or 9 prophecies, all of them but 2 are things that are common knowledge from history. I'm not going to read Tacitus. I'm not going to read Josephus right now. But Tacitus being a Roman historian, Josephus being a Jewish historian. So most of the prophecies, not all of them, by the way, a couple of them are not common knowledge. I'll mention those. But most of them, like where Jesus lived. Right? We don't have to rely on Christian sources. Now, of course, honestly, I think Peter and John and these guys were telling the truth. It doesn't make much sense that they weren't, but all right, even if you only accept non-Christian sources, most of these prophecy fulfillments are a matter of history. Okay? I've got those quotes there, but I'm not going to actually read them right now. There's Pontius Pilate. They used to claim he wasn't a real person. The liberals say, no, Pontius Pilate, that's just some guy they made up in the Bible. Then here's the stone found in Caesarea, which says Tiberius, who was king then, Pilatus, Pontius, and all that sort of stuff. He's a real guy. I believe he's a real guy. Okay, next, question number 3. Well, are they really messianic prophecies? So maybe, they're reading the Old Testament and it says, and I don't know, Moses ate an orange or something like that. And so Jesus is going to eat an orange to fulfill that prophecy or something like that. Well, we're going to look at about 8 or 9 prophecies. All but one of them, the Jews themselves have been saying for centuries already, these are prophecies about our Messiah. So we'll let the Jews, even the Jews who don't believe in Jesus, tell us whether these prophecies are indeed messianic ones. I'll mention that as we go through. And number 4. All right, could Jesus, planning on deceiving the people into believing he was the Messiah, have read the Old Testament and tried to fulfill the prophecies? For example, Zechariah 9:9, which is not even on our list today. Zechariah 9:9, it says, all right, the king will come to you riding on a donkey and a colt the foal of a donkey. Okay, great. Here's, I don't know, 50 shekels. Could you rent me your donkey? Because I need to ride. Just, trust me, I just kind of need to ride on a donkey. So maybe Jesus is reading the Old Testament. All right, it says Messiah is going to do this. Okay, great. I guess I'll do that. And but the Messiah has to get killed. Okay. But we're going to see some prophecies that Jesus fulfilled that it is ridiculous to even propose he could have sort of worked it out. We'll see that. Okay, so having listened to the skeptic proposing reasons to not believe this stuff, let's go to Isaiah 53. I was reading this with one of the guys we met on campus just yesterday, and probably most of you have done this at one time or another. Just find a random person who knows nothing about the Bible or Christianity or anything, ask them to read Isaiah 53, and then ask them who's it talking about. And even a completely religiously ignorant person will know immediately who it's talking about. This was written roughly 720 BC, roughly 750 years before Christ was crucified. By the way, what was happening in California 750 years ago? I know Columbus hadn't landed yet. That's a long time. All right, Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53. And as we read this, try to pretend for a moment you don't know who it's talking about, just for the sake of argument, okay? Isaiah 53. Who has believed our message? To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering, familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain, he bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. I have to be careful with my P's for this. Right? The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we're healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned our own ways, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth, and it goes on. And again, even a completely religiously ignorant person knows who this is about. Now, let's play the skeptic's game. Can we be absolutely certain that this prophecy precedes the life of Christ by at least 300 years? Absolutely. Is this a messianic prophecy? Hello? Is the fulfillment of these prophecies a matter of historical record? You bet it was. But could Jesus, reading Isaiah 53, have kind of like, all right, I got to get despised and rejected. Could you do that? Yeah. Say to the Pharisees, you brood of vipers, whitewashed tombs. All right. I'll give that one. The skeptic wins that one. All right, but pierced for our transgressions. That's not talking about the crucifixion. That's Psalm 22. That's talking about the piercing in his side, right? Now, could Jesus have arranged to be pierced? I guess so. Hey, Roman soldier, do me a favor. Just trust me, okay? My friend will give you, 10 shekels later. When I die, could you please just trust me, okay? You're killing me, Sorry, that's a bad joke. You're killing me. Could you thrust the thing up into my side? That's ridiculous. Silent before shears so he didn't open his mouth. Yeah. Now let's go to our next one. Okay. Micah 5, verse 2. Micah 5, verse 2. 540 BC, roughly. A little over 550 years before Jesus. Micah was a contemporary of Isaiah. So about 750 before Jesus. Verse 2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. This is definitely a messianic prophecy, to say the least. The Jews always have recognized this as a messianic prophecy. By the way, where was Jesus born? Bethlehem. That's common knowledge of history. Now, could Jesus have arranged to be born in Bethlehem? By the way, there's two Bethlehems. Israel has two Bethlehems. The smaller of the two is Bethlehem Ephrathah. That's the one that Jesus is from. Could Jesus have arranged to be born in Bethlehem? Well, yeah, if he's God. If he is the one. If he is the one who, before Abraham was born, he is. But then that's interesting, because then there's Isaiah 7. I'm not even going to do the Isaiah 9 thing. That's a good one. Isaiah 9:15, you can read that one. I'm going to go to Isaiah 7. Nope, backward. I'm not going to do Isaiah 7, the one about the virgin being with child. I'm going to do Isaiah 9, starting in verse 1. Okay? You could have corrected me. You said, John, it says right there, Isaiah 9, verse 1. All right, here we go. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles, Galilee of the nations, by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. Now, let me skip down to verse 4. Verse 5. All right, verse 6. To us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This is definitely a messianic prophecy. And where was Jesus born? Well, let me show you a map. Okay, that's a map, the 12 tribes, okay? Find Zebulun. It's orange. Zebulun is blue. And find Naphtali. It's orange. See where that is? Okay, next map. Do you see where Nazareth is? Nazareth is like right on the border between Zebulun and Naphtali. Okay, could Jesus have been born? Because in order to be the Messiah, you got to get born in Bethlehem, but you have to come from Nazareth. It is a historical fact that Jesus was from Nazareth. In fact, what did they call his followers? Nazarenes. Could Jesus have arranged? Now, how many people living today in the entire world were born in Bethlehem but come from the region of Zebulun and Naphtali? How about you, Elisa? Are you qualified for Messiah on this one? Has anybody here ever met anybody who meets those two requirements? I haven't yet. All right, so let's do another one. All right, Psalm 22. This is a great one. All right, Psalm 22. Now, if all we had in the Bible was one of these prophecies, just one of them, that would be like, that's crazy. But after 10 of these, the case is made. And the person who doesn't accept the obvious conclusion must have some logic errors going on. Like, what do you mean? What's your explanation? Psalm 22. Psalm 22, I'll start in verse 16. Now, as we're reading this, imagine David is the one who wrote this, roughly 1020 BC, give or take, a little over 1,000 years before Christ. And imagine you're David and you're writing this down, all right? Let's just imagine that. Dogs have surrounded me. A pack of villains encircles me. David's had that experience, I guess. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and they cast lots. They divide my clothes among them, and they cast lots for my garment. So, again, it's worth noting that crucifixion wasn't even invented until roughly 300 BC. And it was the Romans who invented the actual hand and feet piercing method of crucifixion, roughly 100 BC, almost 1,000 years after David wrote this. So imagine David writing this. Okay, great. They pierced my hands and my feet. Okay. Yeah. And what's the thing with the dividing the garments? Now, which did they do? Did they divide the garments or did they cast lots? Which did they do? They did both. They divided the garments and then they cast lots. Now, I admit, of all our prophets, this is the only one that the Jews themselves did not consider to be messianic. We're going to look at it like we're almost done. We have 2 more prophecies. All right? This is the only one that the Jews themselves don't consider to be messianic. But I don't know. Coincidence? You going to argue for that one? All right, we got 2 more. Let's go to Zechariah 11. Zechariah 11. Zechariah is easy to find. If you know your New Testament, just go back about 4 pages from the New Testament and you're there. All right. Zechariah 11. Here we go. Verse 10. Then I took my staff called favor, and I broke it, revoking the covenant I had made with all the nations. So this is about an event that leads to a new covenant. It was revoked on that day, and so the oppressed of the flock who were watching me knew it was the word of the Lord. Then I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they priced me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver, and I threw it to the potter in the house of the Lord. Now, how much was Judas given to betray Jesus? 30. Are you sure about that? Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that. Because, you know what, if you're going to lie, liars are very vague. If you ever known a pathological liar, they just give you the least amount of possible information so they can kind of change their story. But the gospel writers are quite specific, 30 pieces of silver. I like to imagine one of these Jewish leaders, like, 6 months later, he's reading his Bible, reading Zechariah, it says, 30 pieces of silver. Man, should have paid him 100. How many? 30. Could Jesus have arranged the price at which he was sold? No, he wasn't in the room. I like the fact that God used the enemies, those who killed Jesus, to prove that Jesus is the Messiah. But then what happened to the money? Well, Judas relented. I think his plan was to get Jesus to rebel, not to get him killed. I think that was his plan. But anyway, so he says, man, I don't want this money. Take this money. He said, we can't take this money. He threw it into the house of the Lord. You know what they did with that money? They bought a potter's field. A potter's field. All right, last one. Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 and 25. I think the conclusion of the matter has already been established, but I don't know. I can't skip this one. So Daniel was reading the book of Jeremiah. And I'm pretty sure he was reading either Jeremiah 24 or Jeremiah 29, which talked about 70 years of captivity before God would set them free. So he's praying, God is, because at this point he'd been in captivity for 68 years. So basically he says, God, come on, let's get going here. And God says, here's the answer to your prayer. Not 70 years, no. Verse 24. Okay? So he says, 77s. Anybody do that math? 70 times 7? 490. 77s are decreed for your people in your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the Messiah, the Messiah. All right? No one understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the Messiah, the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be built with streets in the trench, etc. All right, now, is this a messianic prophecy? Yeah. I mean, it's the word Messiah is in there twice. I'm pretty sure it's a messianic prophecy. It's about somebody who's going to come to Jerusalem and atone for wickedness and bring in everlasting. This is a messianic prophecy. And he says, from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, it's going to be 490 years. How do I know it's years? Because look earlier, he's talking about the 70 years, the literal 70 years of the captivity. All right, so was there ever a decree issued to restore and rebuild Jerusalem? Is that the decree of Cyrus in 538 BC? Nope. He said, go back and build the temple. That's in Ezra 1. And then Darius said, come on, man, this is Ezra 4, build the temple. But they did not authorize them to rebuild Jerusalem. No, it was Artaxerxes. In fact, it's the 7th year of Artaxerxes. It's in Ezra chapter 7. The 7th year of Artaxerxes is the year 458 BC. All right? He ruled starting in 465 BC. So let's subtract 490 from 458. The answer is negative 32. All right, so what year would that be? 32 AD. Nope. Because there was no year zero. There was no year zero. The calendar went from 1 BC to 1 AD. So according to Daniel, writing in the year 538 BC, 560-something years before Christ came. By the way, this decree was written 2 generations after Daniel died. Okay? According to him, when's the Messiah going to come to Jerusalem? Well, somewhere right around 33 AD, actually. If you look more carefully, it's 7 sevens, 62 sevens. The actual prophecy is between 26 and 33, actually, if you go into the details. All right, great. So, anybody here want to claim to be the Messiah? All right, good luck, because you have to be born in Bethlehem, but you have to actually come from the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. You have to be despised and rejected, pierced and crucified, and silent when accused. All right, you have to be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. Count it, 30. You have to have your garments divided and gambled over. And you have to have the money used to betray you, used to buy a potter's field. And you also have to kind of do all this and sum it all up somewhere around the year 30 AD. So sorry, it's too late. Is there any possible room for doubt that Jesus is the Messiah? Any other candidates coming forward? Yeah. All right, and so, I go back to the claims of Jesus, right? He said, can anybody prove me guilty of sin? Silence in the room. He says, I'm the resurrection and the life. And he raised a man dead in his grave for 4 days. He said, I'm the bread of life. If you feed upon me, you will have eternal life. And he made bread. So, again, how do unbelievers handle their unbelief? And a second, because remember, John has Jesus saying to Mary, do you believe this? That's my question tonight. Do you believe this? And how could you not believe this, given the messianic prophecies? Help me out here. Explain your unbelief. Please explain your unbelief to me in light of what we've seen tonight. I don't know. I just don't know how unbelievers do it. But you know, there's a lot of people who say they believe in Jesus, and yet obviously they don't. Because what is a rational response? All right, what is a rational response? It's to bow and make him Lord, which hopefully a lot of you have already done. Now, I've been going for too long because we're supposed to end at 8:30. We want to do Q&A. So I'm going to skip the most obvious evidence for Jesus, which is the empty tomb. And the tomb was empty, I'll tell you that right now. And his resurrection was declared. I'm telling you that right now. And I'm telling you, he was definitely crucified. And the only explanation I've ever heard for that is that he was raised from the dead. But we're going to skip all that really awesome stuff. All right, swoon theory and all that craziness, okay? All right, because Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of the Messiah, and because he was indeed raised from the dead on the third day, there's only one reasonable conclusion. He's not a liar, and he's definitely not crazy. He is God. That's who he is. In comparison of Jesus to Muhammad or Joseph Smith or Baha'u'llah or Krishna, it's almost like a joke. Some of them they're okay people. Some of them honestly weren't. But to put Jesus in that category, that's craziness. All right, so that's our talk for tonight. And I'm here to do a Q&A session. You could ask stuff directly related to that. You could ask a Bible question, a theology question. I'm like a Bible teacher, so I'll happily take questions. You could ask me who's going to, win the Super Bowl, and I won't answer that question. All right. Why? Well, you have to ask a question now. Never mind. We'll come back to you. Maybe a Bible question, theology question, doctrinal question, a question related to the prophecies, the reliability of the Bible. If you go to my website, I've answered 3,200 questions so far. So, kind of what I do. Yeah.
What is your best tip on how to evangelize on campus?
All right. That has absolutely nothing to do with this topic, but my best tip for evangelizing on campus is to spend many hours on campus talking to people. What we do, and it's working, we've gotten, I think, like almost 600 phone numbers and emails. That's quite a few. That's a lot. I just sit behind a table and ask people if they want to talk, if they want to join our club. Yeah, I think there's no shortcut. I think the thing to do is to get your butt up out there on campus. Excuse me, can I say that? All right. And talk to students. All right. And I found that having like a banner and sort of a sign-up list, that means they can come and talk to me if they want to. For me, walking up to somebody they don't know and just starting a conversation, that's great. That's awesome. You could do that. But this way they get to decide if they want to talk to you or not. So anyway, prayer. I don't usually get practical Christianity questions. I get more like Bible questions, doctrine questions. What about the Nephilim? You know, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so when you have this lesson and people, come to grips with that, okay, Jesus was real, and as people, we tend to either we're going to do something or we're not going to do something. Like, how do you, encourage people to do something or encourage yourself to do something and take it more seriously? Because I think knowing the truth and then just going on and forgetting about it the next day and going on with your life, how do we just keep remembering?
Right. That's a good question. So generally, there's the answer depends on the person. You obviously know that. And so most people find themselves being attracted to Christ not because of the facts and the evidence. That's just not the typical person. Typical person comes to Christ because they feel a need, an emptiness. They see the relationships. They see the lives lived. All right. And in fact, I was doing a study with a guy just today, and we're reading in John 1. And John 1:14, it says, Jesus came full of grace and truth. And I asked him, which one do you find draws you? The fact that Jesus gives grace or that he gives truth? I've asked many people that question. And about 60 or 70% say grace. All right? So for that person, a logical argument, no matter how powerful it is, has almost no effect. It's crazy, because it's, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately corrupt and all that kind of stuff. And so for that person, I think they just need to see Christianity working. They just need to see that it actually works. So for them, I'd say it's the whole Andrew Nathaniel thing. Where Andrew said, man, it's awesome. He's the Messiah. He's coming, blah. And then he's like, yeah, right. From Nazareth? Give me a break. So what did Andrew say? Anybody? What did Andrew say? He said, just come and see. All right? But there are people. Anyway, my friend, the one I was studying with today, he said, truth. I'm looking for truth. And I think he was being sincere. So somebody like that, an argument like this, can really motivate them. In fact, on the spot, they can say, what do I need to do? Where's the water? That's the minority. So everybody's different. There's no one answer. I think we have to learn to let the Holy Spirit speak, when we're studying with people. All right? Yeah, I'm not sure if I exactly answered your actual question. I may have answered a peripheral question to what you were actually asking.
Like a place you can go right now?
Excuse me?
Is Jesus' tomb, does it exist? Do they say, oh, this is where Jesus' tomb was? Is that a place?
Yeah, actually, if you go to Jerusalem, there's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. All right? And they've done some archaeological studies there. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built by Constantine's mother. All right? She didn't literally build it, She paid for it to be built. And it was built in the 4th century, but the evidence is that this was claimed to be the site of his temporary entombment since maybe the early 3rd century. And so you can go there. I would say there's all kinds of claims in the Middle East. This is, where, the woman at the well, and this is where, all this sort of stuff. One of the few claims that there's a pretty decent chance it's actually true is that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre may indeed be built on the site where Jesus' tomb was. Of course, he's not there, so who cares? I mean, okay. Yeah. So you can go there. But the thing is, if you go there, there's these competing factions. There's the Armenian Christians, the Greek Christians, the Roman Christians, and I forget the fourth. And they argue over everything. And, You know, they have their own little sect. It's so divisive. It's so bad. They have a Muslim who oversees the Church of the Holy Sepulchre because no Christian can agree on anything. It's crazy, but it's a fun place to go. All right.
Question: how can I persuade someone who believes in natural selection and to believe in God through the idea of origins of species and Darwinism?
Okay, you slurred your word just slightly there. Who believes in what?
Who believes in like natural selection?
All right.
Like the origins of species and like, you know,
Yeah.
evolutionary theory.
Well, I hope all of us believe in natural selection. Is there anybody here who doesn't believe in natural selection? I mean, you know the dogs that run across the road without looking, how many of them are left? Right. They're gone. They've been taken out of the June pool. Dogs are so smart nowadays about crossing the road, you know, because they got taken out. I mean, who doesn't believe in natural selection? All right, so that's not really the question you're asking, though, I'm pretty sure. I think you're asking, how about somebody who believes in the whole evolution idea? Is that what you're asking about? All right, good. All right, so now, who invented evolution? Was it Darwin that invented evolution? No, it was God that invented evolution. Because over time, the earth changes. And species need to change over time to respond to change in the environment. Otherwise, they just kind of go away. And so the whole thing with mutations are like 1 in 4 billion. They're very, very rare. And and yet those mutations, most of them produce nothing or death, but then a tiny, tiny fraction produces a change, which is positive, all right? The evolution of viruses, you know, has the COVID virus evolved a little bit? So evolution is God's plan for species to change over time. Now, my personal opinion is God intervenes in that process. How often does God intervene directly in your life? I mean, does he change the light green so you make it to work on time? And does he suddenly clean up the mess on the counter? So, you know, so I believe God directly intervenes quite rarely. How often does God directly intervene in history? Like as in, I'm sorry it was going this way. No, it's going to go that way instead. I'm going to get my people out of Egypt. God intervenes directly very rarely. And I believe God intervenes in natural processes also very rarely, but I believe he does. I don't believe that we could have evolved from one-celled things just by random mutations and evolution. But evolution does happen. And why would a Christian get defensive about that? I've never figured that out. Why are Christians against, I mean, is there any other explanation available in science for the experimental evidence other than, natural selection and all that stuff? So, now, I know some people are into this whole thing that the earth is only 6,000 years old. All right, well, good luck with that idea, dealing with science, and I don't think that's a required interpretation of Genesis 1, but you didn't ask me that question. So I'd say, amen, God, awesome. I wish I could have thought of evolution. I wish I could have created a biological system that responds to change over time by adapting to that, and in some cases, even improving. What's that? Oh, well, I would say I believe in evolution too. What about it? All right, let's look at the prophecies of the Messiah. So the reason you believe in I don't believe in evolution. In science, you don't believe in things. Science proposes explanations, some of which are consistent, some are not. And the only explanation thus far consistent with the genetic and fossil evidence is evolution. I don't believe in evolution. I just believe it's a good explanation. So let's look at Psalm 22. Let's look at Isaiah 53. Let's look at Zechariah 11. Let's look at Zechariah 9. Let's look at Daniel 9. Let's look at Micah 5:2. Let's look at Isaiah 9:1 and 6. What do you think about that? So I'd kind of put it back on them. Okay, I agree with that.
My question is, I know that a lot of the statements where Jesus says like who he is, a lot of them take place in John, which some people or specific groups don't believe in the validity of John, due to like when it was written or things like that. So what would you, I guess, what would be the counter argument to that, John's validity?
Okay. So I want to make sure I understand your exact question. So some people think that whoever wrote John was lying or made his stuff up or something like that, or
I don't know if it's Muslim specifically, but like if you were to like talk about who Jesus is, like
Right.
they're more likely to trust the first three because they were like written sooner and
yeah.
there's less of an agenda maybe, but
Yeah. That's actually a good question. You know, we have a manuscript of the book of John, it's called the Rylands Papyrus. It's in the Rylands Museum in Manchester. It's from 125 AD. So John was certainly written in the first century. John was being quoted by Clement of Rome in 95 AD. So the book of John was written in the first century. All right. If somebody wants to propose something that's in John that's inconsistent with history, I don't know. And now it is true that in John we see Jesus proclaiming more directly things about himself earlier than we see in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But John wrote this gospel to the Christian community who were well aware of these things. And so, I mean, the people who were in a position to know if John was sort of, I don't know, making it up, really? I mean, you think he just made this stuff up? That, to me, that doesn't make sense. But all I know is the Christian community, many of whom actually met Jesus, they didn't have a problem with the book of John. And so some Muslim guy 2,000 years later trying to make trouble for us, I mean, why would I believe him? I believe, say, Polycarp, who actually met the Apostle John and wrote about him. So, yeah. Let me see. What else? There's a few other things I could say, but definitely, John was the last of the Gospels written. That's almost certainly true, okay? And so John was reading the other Gospels and asking, what things that happened that aren't recorded in the other Gospels, those are the things I'm going to reveal in my Gospel. Anyway, if people want to accuse him of lying, we need some evidence to support that. I would say this. You know, people say, oh, it was written way, way, way after the event. So how do you even know it even happened? All right, let me see. I'll start with Gary. Gary, what high school did you go to? All right, how many years ago was that? All right, so we're already roughly 80 AD. So do you think John would have forgotten or something like that? People try to create the impression that these Gospels were written so much later that you can't even trust them. But I'm telling you, 50 years from now, probably a good half of you will still be alive. All right? 50 years from now, a good half of you will still be alive. And if somebody's going to tell you that it was, it was John Kennedy who spoke tonight at this assembly, you're going to go, no, I was there. So if you're going to tell a lie about Jesus, you'd have to wait for at least 100 years for all those eyewitnesses to die. So sure, they can say what they want. People will say that, but it is true. It is true. Matthew, Mark, and Luke have similar material. All right, and in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus is not publicly declaring who he is as early, but I don't know, I'm pretty sure John is not lying. I'm pretty sure John wrote the book of John. All right, so that'd be my response. That is a good question. One thing, when you hear skeptics, often they'll reveal to you information you weren't aware of at first. All right, and so when that can be disconcerting when this Jesus-hating atheist person reveals information that nobody told you at church. It can make you nervous. But what I've found is the more I hear these skeptics make these claims, the more it's obvious that they're wrong and I'm right when I investigate that. All right, another question. Two more. Okay, great.
Can you speak to the fine-tuned universe theory, or the kind of concept?
The what universe theory?
The fine-tuned universe?
Yeah, sure. You want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, now, the Bible said all along that the universe was created from nothing. All right, for example, in Hebrews 11, verse 3, it says, by faith we know that the visible things were created from the invisible. All right, so the Bible was very clear on creation. The fancy term is ex nihilo. In other words, everything from nothing. No other religion other than Judaism and Christianity had ever made that claim. Buddhist cosmology, Hindu cosmology, Babylonian cosmology, Egyptian cosmology, all ancient cosmologies had what we're seeing being made out of pre-existing stuff. All right, and then in 1930, Hubble discovered that the universe is expanding very, very rapidly, and the red shift. And then in the early 60s, they discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation. So by the 1960s, the accepted theory was this: the universe was created from nothing. All right? Just, in other words, there was nothing. No time, no space. Literally, not even time, never mind space or matter. The universe was created in a brilliant flash of life, everything from nothing. Okay, great. So that's called the Big Bang model, which confirmed the biblical cosmology and destroyed the cosmology of all other religions. I'm not exaggerating. Okay, but then when they investigated how this event must have happened, they noticed a few very surprising things. Thank you for the softball question, by the way. I love those kind. Yeah. All right. So what they noticed is the force of gravity is tuned to a precision that is just, it doesn't even make sense. Turns out, if the force of gravity was bigger than it is by 0.0000, 60 zeros and then a 1, by that fraction, if it had been stronger than that, the universe would have collapsed almost as soon as it was created. On the other hand, if the force of gravity had been weaker than it is by the same amount, galaxies and stars never would have formed. So a good question for the atheist is, why is there gravity? Good luck explaining that one. I mean, why does gravity even exist? There is literally no conceivable explanation within science. So you're forced to a philosophical explanation. But then you say, okay, fine. Let's just say that gravity exists. Why does it have the value that it has? Okay? It's because even if you assume there is gravity, where gravity came from, that's a great question. Even if you assume, what are the chances it would have the right value so we could have planets and stars? 1 part in 10 to the 60th. That would be like you won the big lotto 6 weeks in a row. All right, you win the big lotto, great. You don't play the lottery though, right? We don't gamble. We're Christian. We don't gamble. All right. But let's say you did. I don't know. Somebody bought you a ticket. All right, and you win the big lotto. Then the next week, you win the big lotto again. And then the next week, you win it again. And in 3 more weeks. So that's just based on the gravitational force alone, the universe is insanely precisely arranged so that we can exist. But then there's a list of at least 30 other parameters: the nuclear strong force, the nuclear weak force, the balance between matter and antimatter, the balance between electrons and protons, which are made by completely different things. And the list goes on, stuff that, sorry, you don't know much about. And then if you start multiplying the probabilities and kind of extending the number, it's like, if you believe that this universe was not designed, then I don't know what to say. I mean, so that's what you're talking about, the fine-tuning argument, which is also called the cosmological argument. Not exactly, but more or less. The argument from design is overwhelming, in my opinion. Now, that doesn't prove the Bible. That proves creator. It proves powerful, intelligent, personal creator. which, all right, that's a good start. But that's, people don't hear the cosmological argument and go, amen, I'm going to repent of my sins and make Jesus Lord. All right, so that argument is incredible, except it affects a very small number of actual people. But, yeah, that's a good one. All right, one more question.
Plane landing kind of question at the end.
All right, that was a kind of a sciencey one. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. So I was translate that in English, but it didn't give me so much time. So
Do you speak French?
yes.
Oh, I don't, so sorry.
So this is a question that we are not used to ask this question, but I believe it may be necessary to know that. We know a lot about the character, the Jesus character, and we know a lot about his miracles. But I don't know if the Bible describes Jesus, how he was physically, and what do you so how do you think? So really we see like the people put Jesus on the photo. I don't believe in that, but I want to know, what do you think about that?
What do I think about Jesus' physical appearance?
Yes.
Okay, Isaiah 53 says this. It says, he had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. So I interpret that as Jesus physically was kind of your average guy. Not this big, huge macho guy, not a skinny guy. What was the color of his skin? Now, it's almost offensive to ask that question as if that would be important, but it's not a completely crazy and unreasonable question. So my answer would be, go to Jordan, go to Israel, go to Lebanon, look around, kind of sort of take an average of the guys you see there. That's kind of what Jesus looked like.
Thank you so much.
He was not black, he was not white. A lot of people get into the whole Jesus is black thing. That's a strange form of racism in and of itself. But you know what? I almost don't blame people for doing that, because for hundreds of years, Jesus was presented as a white guy with light brown hair. You know what I'm saying? And so people who had that shoved in their face for long enough have tended to kind of overreact and go the other way, which is, of course, a bad idea. But Jesus, I believe, was just a regular-looking guy, not terrifically handsome or terrifically ugly. All right? Just an average working guy. And that's what the Bible seems to present. You see all these pictures of Jesus, right? Well, did somebody take a photograph or something? It is interesting because there's this sort of average sort of picture of what Jesus looks like. Because you see a picture, you go, that's Jesus, right? So where did that come from? Is that a reflection of what he actually looked like? I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe. But I don't know, if he got blonde hair and light skin, that's definitely not him. Got black with woolly hair, that's definitely not him. Okay?
John, thank you again for coming here, presenting just such an awesome case for Jesus being the revealed Messiah, bringing historical evidence, and then even being able to answer questions like you have that are scientific even. Obviously, as you do these lectures, they're designed to meet people in different phases or places in their faith, whether it's from non-belief to someone maybe been Christian their whole life and needing to develop in their conviction. You kind of touched on it a little bit already throughout the lecture, but just one final kind of closing thought, because your question still stands on board. What is your response in short and skinny? What would you encourage the crowd here to have some final conclusions? Not just believing in Christ, right? But what is the action? What is the result that should come from our evident belief that Jesus is who he says he is?
I think we should do what he said. Yeah. You know, I believe in gravity, all right, so I don't step off cliffs. I mean, if you believe in Jesus, then I mean, he is God. You know, I've heard people say things like, well, you know, if that's what God's like, then I'm not going to worship him. I say, good luck with that on Judgment Day. Good luck with that one. Now, because God is who and what he is, and we got to deal with that because we are, the existence of God tells us that we are eternal beings. We're in his image. And so, you know, we kind of take for granted that God is God of love, you know, because God could have been a vindictive God, and even then we'd have to obey him, you know. But luckily, we have a God who loves us. And so I just say, what's the reasonable response to somebody who gave their life for you? Jesus gave his life for you. Jesus sacrificed everything for you. He took beatings. He was abandoned. He was killed. He did that, and he did it knowingly and willingly. Jesus read Isaiah 53, I'm sure, a few times. Jesus read Psalm 22, and he knew what was coming, and he resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Yeah. I believe we should give our life to him. Anything less than that is to do dishonor to him. So, yeah, believing in him means obeying him and living like he lived. So, commit to studying the Bible and getting right with God.
Thank you for your time, John. Thank you so much. All right, guys. That concludes our lecture for tonight. Again, thank you guys for those who came new to us. The Central Valley Church of Christ. We have people like John in our church who are well-educated and are helpful. Tomorrow we have a food pantry for those who are in need, those who want to volunteer. It's at 8:30 to show up to volunteer, but it starts at 10 a.m. to receive that. If you know people in your family, community, please encourage them to come out and take part in that. We want to give. We have church service on 10:30 on Sunday, and we have a campus ministry group for young adults. If you guys know people who are in college age who need Christ in their life, who need more of the truth, come talk to myself or my wife, and we'll be happy to get you guys connected. Thank you guys for tonight. Have a wonderful one. Thank you.